We know it's been a very rough season for cotton around the Texas High Plains, but how is the crop doing right now? I had a chance today to get an update from Steve Verett, CEO of Plains Cotton Growers.
Well, Steve, I think that if anybody is putting together a narrative of the 2020 season here in the Texas High Plains, uh, cotton always comes up first and foremost as the crop that has suffered the most. So I guess I wanted to lead off by asking you, is there any good news that can be shared at this point, maybe in terms of recent developments or things that have occurred during the season?
Well, I think, James, the good thing that we could point out is that what crop we do have left has progressed well, and I think has some hope to at least deliver what we had hoped for out of those acres, and maybe a little bit better. It's just the fact that we're working with so few acres due to what happened early in the season.
Right, and when you say deliver what you would have hoped for, is that yield, quality, both, or what?
I think it's going to be both from at least the early results we have seen. There's been very little harvest take place, but it's beginning to pick up this week, and I know of a little bit of cotton that was in last week, and saw some of the grades. The yield, it was dryland cotton that was had to be defoliated, had to be desiccated in order to be harvested. Nothing stellar about the yield, but from just looking at the field and everything it's been through, it's about what the farmer thought it was going to make, something a little less than probably 250 pounds to the acre. But the outstanding thing that I heard, at least from this field, was the quality was just absolutely exceptional. The color was not totally unexpected. You know, when you have cotton that receives no rainfall on it after it opens up, the color is usually going to remain good, bright, white. And that was the case with this cotton, 11s and 21s. But the leaf was not totally unexpected, two leaf. But the real surprise was both the staple length and the micronair. The staple length was all 35 and 36s, and the micronair was all in the base range, 4.3, 4.4s, and 4.5s. Totally unexpected for dry land, what you would consider to be burn-up cotton. So that's an early glimpse, and by no means is necessarily going to represent the whole crop, but was certainly an encouraging factor in the report that I got on that.
And geographically, whereabouts would this be located?
That was in Crosby County, eastern Crosby County is where it was, about the middle, of the territory. Certainly not the furthest north, but certainly not on the very southern end of our PCG territory.
And when we talk about then the percentage of acres that are left, or what you have left to work with, what does that come to, would you say, in terms of the percentage of acres that were planted across the Texas High Plains?
Yeah, when we visited last, James, I think we talked about, the fact that we've lost the district estimates by NASS. So trying to figure out where we are has become much more of a guessing game. And the only real numbers that we have to go on are FSAs, or the Farm Service Agencies, certified acreage numbers. And those tend to be kind of slow coming in. When we only had the August numbers, we knew at the time that many of the failed acres had not been failed at that point. But as of September 1st in that report, when we look at the combined 1N and 1S crop reporting districts, which very closely resembles the PCG coverage area, there were 4.289 million acres planted, about what we expected. We were expecting something a little over 4 million acres. Failed acreage as of September 1, please keep that in mind. We're not saying this is the final number, but as of September 1 that FSA recorded, 1.847 million acres failed, leaving 2.442 million acres for harvest. That's a 43% abandonment across the whole area. Now, when you start breaking that down, though, and looking at 1N and 1S separately, 1N planted 1.727 million acres, failed at this point at September 1, 389,000, with 1.337 million acres to go to harvest. 22.5% abandonment or failure, a much lower number than the overall number. But then when we get into the large 1 South district, the more dry land, less irrigation, there were 2.56 million acres planted. As of September 1, FSA is showing 1.458 million acres failed, or 56.9% abandonment or failure rate. So that's the numbers that we have. We know we have significantly less acres going to harvest than we did last year. But as I say, the one bright spot in this is hopefully the yields will be at least what we've been looking at, and expect the weather has allowed what crop is there to mature out. The irrigated guys that might have been worried a little bit about maturity have had, ample good open weather on it to get this stuff close to being ready to defoliate. And as we move into the next 2 weeks, we're going to see a lot of defoliation take place and harvest begin to ramp up significantly in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
1N and 1S, I think the letters that designate those areas, N is, of course, north, S is south. But is that N is more like the Panhandle, S is more like the South Plains?
No, it really splits along about a plain view line is where it kind of splits, generally speaking. From Plainview, that's roughly the area, and it's all above the cap, all those areas above the cap. And then south from Plainview down to Midland, Odessa.
Yeah, and it looks like that when we talk about the comparison on the abandonment rates, obviously that's going to match pretty much the Texas Drought Monitor map. When we
yes, that's correct. And you have to keep in mind that the 1N area has a higher percentage of irrigated acres to begin with. Whereas we always talk about that we've got about 40 to 45% irrigated on the high plains of Texas and about 60%, dry land. When you look at 1N, that number might be closer to 50-50, and then 1S is, more like 30% irrigated, 70% dry land. So, but the average we always think about is like 40% irrigated acres.
The numbers you just heard Steve Verett describing certainly illuminate the difficulties cotton farmers in our region have been up against. And something else that we are still waiting to see is what effects on fiber development were suffered when we had that blast of premature winter earlier this month. But still, as Steve related, there's good reason to hope for the cotton that is still out in the fields. As we return to my conversation with Steve, I've just asked what needs to happen between now and the end of the season to bring about the best possible outcome.
Certainly from just a harvest and quality standpoint, the best thing that we could have is just good open weather. And that's kind of the quandary that we're in. We all know how dry it is and how, we need a rain, absolutely, from the standpoint if you're trying to get a small grain established or if you're just thinking about, trying to build soil profile moisture for the coming year. But, from a crop perspective, the best weather that we could hope for would be open weather. I guess, at this point, I always hate to speak generally. A rain would still be very beneficial, but the longer we go in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the more cotton that gets defoliated, the more of it that gets open, the more vulnerable it is to the weather. So certainly in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the best thing that we can see from a cotton harvest perspective is open weather. And then hopefully we can get that done as soon as possible, and then hope and pray for some good winter moisture.
And Steve and I also talked about cotton prices.
We've been trading in a range that we just can't seem to break out of. When you look at the December contract, we've been trading anywhere from 62 up to 66. We're actually in the green today. Break even, and when we talk about what's profitable for farmers, that's different for everybody, and certainly depending on yield. But it's always safe to say, we need a 7 in front of that number to even be approaching a good break-even price and a profitable price. So we're not where we'd like to be, but certainly looking at where we are on demand, we're hopeful that demand's going to start picking up some. It's just difficult to make the case for significantly higher prices until we see worldwide demand starting to pick up.
And that's an update on what's going on with cotton from Steve Verett of Plains Cotton Growers. I certainly appreciate the time Steve gave me for our interview, and I thank you for visiting jameshuntag.com.